The next item of business is a debate on motion 24078 in the name of Gillian Martin on behalf of the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform Committee on Green Recovery Inquiry. Can I ask all members who wish to take part in this debate to press the request to speak buttons now, and I call on Gillian Martin to speak to and move the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. As convener of the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform Committee, I welcome this opportunity to highlight the committee's recent report on green recovery and to move the motion on behalf of the committee. Our inquiry explored the parameters of an effective green recovery from COVID-19 and identified key actions for change, immediate priorities and potential barriers to implementation. We heard from experts, stakeholders and from people in communities across Scotland who have been adversely impacted by the COVID crisis and who may be more vulnerable to the changes needed to achieve net zero. Their voices were at the heart of our consideration. Many highlighted issues and actions across a broad range of Cabinet Secretary and committee remits, demonstrating the cross-cutting and integrated nature of a green recovery. And I would like to thank everyone who contributed to our inquiry, particularly under the very difficult circumstances we find ourselves in, by providing written evidence, appearing remotely to give evidence as part of committee meetings, and in particular by engaging on our online outreach work, which took place across the whole country. Our report opened with a quote from Christiana Figueres, one of the architects of the 2015 Paris Agreement. Ms Figueres says, "Moments of crisis are always moments of opportunity. The COVID-19 pandemic is a global crisis. It has tested the limits of our resilience, and as crises so very often do, it has highlighted and in many cases exacerbated existing inequalities. The pandemic has set a new context for all policy making and will have a fundamental and lasting impact on the way that we live, work and travel. But as we look to the future and to the processes of recovery, it's also given us a chance to build a more sustainable, inclusive and equitable society, to address inequalities, empower communities and drive action across Scotland to tackle both the health crisis and the crises of climate change and biodiversity loss. A green recovery should do exactly this. It should build a more resilient, just and healthy society and environment. It should take a systems-wide, integrated approach. It must transcend sectoral boundaries and government portfolios. And it should seek to build community cohesion, well-being and equality to create a greener, fairer and healthier Scotland for now and for future generations. Scotland has already shown it can be bold in the face of a crisis. We have seen how a coherent route map, combined with strong leadership and urgent action at scale, can affect the necessary change in our policies and behaviours. We must be equally bold in dealing with the climate and biodiversity crisis and the challenge of ensuring a just transition as part of a truly green recovery. Key to this approach is strong leadership and creation of an effective route map for a green recovery with clear timelines, clear responsibilities for delivery across all parts of the public sector, clear delivery plans for each sector to signpost the way, and regular reporting of progress to Parliament and to the people of Scotland. We need an increased commitment and financial resourcing of actions to deliver an integrated holistic green recovery, and we need to apply tests to all new and existing policies to ensure that policy and funding is aligned with that recovery. The coming year provides an opportunity to improve public policy alignment, as many policies have been or are already or currently under review. We also need to tackle the implementation gap, where solutions have already been identified but not applied. There are ways out of the current situation already in existence. We need to capture and lock in positive behaviours and to build resilience through valuing nature more. Underpinning this, we must focus on people, innovation, skills and jobs. The overwhelming amount of expert witnesses in our evidence sessions pointed to the fundamental importance of skills development. We've called on the Scottish Government to carry out a skills audit and produce a skills action plan to support delivery of a green recovery. We've asked that this be focused on those who are unemployed, underemployed, or at risk of unemployment as a result of the economic crisis and transition to net zero. We want those people to be offered meaningful upskilling, reskilling and skills diversification opportunities that will pull people across into low-carbon, environmentally and economically sustainable jobs. We must ensure there are no gaps in line with the goals of a just transition that leaves no community behind. Now, we made a few specific recommendations. Amongst them, the committee called on the Scottish Government to establish an enterprise fund to provide financial support, including grants and low-cost loans to support business models that have emerged as a result of innovation during lockdown. We want to prioritise and fund the creation of community work hubs attached to childcare facilities and community spaces, and encourage the public sector to offer unused office space to support communities. We want to ensure transport budgets and fiscal incentives are targeted at reducing demand for travel by car and encouraging the use of active and sustainable modes. We want spend front-loaded on housing retrofits and energy efficiency schemes, and the skills and training needed for this as a priority. And we want to bring forward a natural capital plan for Scotland and establish a natural capital baseline with monitoring reports to check progress, and align plans for job creation and the need for nature-based solutions and natural capital enhancement. As I say, already a lot of the answers are out there. Taken together, these recommendations provide a springboard from the swift action needed to deliver a truly green recovery for Scotland, a recovery where no one is left behind. I want to turn to the Scottish Government's response to our report. I welcome their very positive response and the fact that they are seeking advice from the Green Recovery from a range of crucial organisations, including the Climate Change Committee and the Just Transition Commission. It's also welcome that the Green Recovery has been central to the Government's approach to recovery from the pandemic, and to see the recognition that it must be embedded in everything the Government does. There has been a marked change in approach in the last 2 years, particularly as we have looked at the Climate Change Bill, now Act. I also welcome the commitment to respond to the significant lessons learned from living and working during this pandemic, prioritising quality of life, health, well-being, as well as our net zero ambitions. But the committee believes that a comprehensive route map is needed to signpost the way. The climate change plan is part of that route map, but is by no means the only route map. Therefore, we would welcome further discussion and a more detailed response to the specific recommendations that we have made in our report. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, the Environment, Land Reform and Climate Change Committee believes that delivering and scrutinising a green recovery will engage all parts of society, government and several parliamentary committees. This cannot be a siloed endeavour, neither at policy level in government or at parliamentary scrutiny level. That simply will not work. My committee is already working collaboratively with other parliamentary committees to ensure that the 2021-2022 government budget and the updated climate change plan provide an effective response to the current challenges and set a foundation for the newly energised and inclusive era of action in Scotland. Now, I started with a Christiana Figueres quote, and I'll end with one. She argues, if governments put health, nature regeneration and climate action at the core of every decision they make in recovering from this pandemic, we can emerge as a stronger and more resilient society. That's exactly what our Green Recovery report calls for, to work collaboratively and innovatively across society to build a more sustainable, inclusive and equitable Scotland. It's only by having such an ambition today and committing to taking such action now that we can build a better Scotland for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now call on Ben Macpherson to open on behalf of the Scottish Government.
Presiding Officer, colleagues, the Scottish Government welcomes today's debate and the work of the committee, because collectively we face very significant challenges in the years ahead and in the here and now. Currently, we are collaborating across Scotland and beyond to save lives and livelihoods in the face of the global pandemic. And at the same time, in the same manner, we must increasingly collaborate to tackle the climate and ecological emergency and to deliver a green and just recovery. A collective response following the pandemic that builds on progress to date in tackling the climate emergency and the twin challenges of biodiversity loss, as well as enhancing prosperity and well-being for all. Presiding Officer, this pandemic, of course, continues to be hugely challenging for all of us. Many have had their livelihoods impacted and, tragically, many have lost loved ones. But as the First Minister often says, there are brighter days ahead. At some point, we will be beyond this crisis and looking back at this time, reflecting on what we have lived through together, what we have learned, and how we recovered from the impact of coronavirus as a society. And as we come out of the pandemic, we really do have an important opportunity, as has been emphasised, to design a better future and to arrange things differently. And that is what we in the Scottish Government are committed to achieving. A green recovery that creates job opportunities, grows Scottish businesses and regional economies, and delivers well-being outcomes for all, as well as I said, tackling the climate emergency as a key and all-inclusive priority. And in the spring, we moved quickly to seek advice on shaping a green recovery from the Climate Change Committee and Just Transition Commission, and we established the Sustainable Renewable Advisory Group. This advice received contributed to our work to lay the foundations now for green recovery. And since then, we have followed a whole government approach. In the first instance, through measures such as our £62 million Energy Transition Fund and the £38 million we spent on pop-up active travel infrastructure. Our programme for government had a focus on green jobs, good green jobs, and measures such as our £1.6 billion of investment in heat and energy efficiency and our £100 million Green Jobs Fund are going to make a difference. More recently, we have published the Climate Change Plan Update and the budget proposals, all of which are centred on green recovery. As well as... Yes?
John Mason.
I thank the Minister for giving way. I mean, he talks about whole government and what the Scottish Government's planning to do. Can we do this independently without the UK Government being involved?
Ben McPherson.
The challenge we face is collective as a society and internationally, and absolutely we do need the UK Government's involvement, whether it's reforming the support known as the Contracts for Difference to deliver support, for example, for wave and tidal generation and to support local supply chains, decarbonisation of the gas grid, also a commitment to linking the UK emission trading scheme to other schemes globally, and a whole range of other matters will be important. And we seek to constructively and appropriately engage with the UK Government, and indeed I was doing so this week to work on that collective response. But absolutely, we can't do it ourselves. We need absolutely the input from the UK Government. I will say more on that shortly. As well as the points I made previously around the climate change plan and the budget proposals, we also set out a package of over 100 new policies announced since the 2018 plan. So this is in the Climate Change Plan Update, which is currently being considered by Parliament. And the plan update addresses many of the points highlighted by the committee's report on green recovery. Both documents, the report and the plan, have a shared commitment to recover from COVID-19 in a way that delivers a just transition to net zero and an economy that is more sustainable, creates green job opportunities and contributes to well-being. I'll take an intervention.
Maurice Golden.
I thank the Minister for taking an intervention. When will the 2013 household recycling rate target be met?
Minister.
The importance of the circular economy is, of course, part of our collective challenge, and I will say more on that shortly. What's more, Presiding Officer, our draft budget, published at the end of January, lays the foundation to rebuild a fairer, stronger and greener economy and deliver opportunities for new work and growth as part of a just transition to net zero. If Parliament agrees the budget, the first £165 million of our low-carbon fund will be committed in the coming year, including £14 million for the Green Jobs Fund, £25 million for bus priority infrastructure and £15 million for zero-emission buses, alongside complementary investment in active travel, heat, peatlands, biodiversity and recycling. The budget also proposes increasing low-carbon capital investment across the Scottish Government to a record £1.9 billion. And these investments underpin our commitment to a green recovery and demonstrate, again, the cross-government approach. We are also supporting our investments through a wider package of skills support, which I know the committee highlighted, including the creation of a Green Workforce Academy, the £25 million Transition Trading Fund and the £60 million Young Persons Guarantee. And early adopters of the guarantee include SSE, Capgemini and NHS Lothian. Furthermore, the Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan will support people to access green jobs through advice, retraining and aligning the skills system with growing demand for green jobs. Nature-based solutions will contribute to green recovery through job creation, mobilising green finance and boosting local economies. And that is why we have therefore made significant multi-year investments of £250 million over 10 years on peatland restoration and an additional £150 million over 5 years in forestry. And our programme for government also announced initiatives to create green jobs in the natural environment. The circular economy, finally, Presiding Officer, also represents an enormous opportunity for Scotland's green recovery. It tackles emissions through influencing product design, manufacturing and waste and resource management, and is a vital part of delivering net zero. And the Climate Change Plan updates sets out ambitious policies to transition to a fully circular economy. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, we have an opportunity to make this time now a turning point on our journey towards net zero and creating a fairer, more prosperous Scotland. Today's debate is part of this process, and I would like to highlight the important role that the committee has played, and in particular to thank Gillian Martin as convener for her leadership, her thoughtful remarks today, and the committee as a whole for their Green Recovery Inquiry report. This is part of a continuous collective process, as I mentioned at the beginning. So I look forward to hearing further contributions through this debate and working together as a Parliament, together, towards achieving our shared ambition, which is a green recovery that benefits the whole of Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call on Liz Smith to be followed by Claudia Beamish.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I think it's fair to say that members across the Parliament both recognise and agree that the primary focus for 21-22 must be on rebuilding Scotland's economy, and that as much as possible of that has to be in line with a very ambitious sustainable green recovery. And I think there's also recognition and agreement that there must be willing cooperation between the private, public and third sectors when it comes to meeting that challenge, whether that's in relation to policy making, job creation, stimulating investment, economic growth, or of course to tackling the immense challenge that is climate change. And to that end, the Green Recovery report spelt out by last July's Climate Emergency Response Group specifically asked for careful consideration of where government, whether that's Westminster or Holyrood, should invest public money to deliver best value, and what incentives would be needed to stimulate the sectors to invest in key infrastructure projects, including within our rural communities, which are so critical to the green recovery. And I would suggest that the Scottish Government has a great deal more still to do in this regard, notwithstanding the fact that there were infrastructure announcements made by Michael Matheson just recently. Because just about every green recovery witness we've heard at committee and now at the committee sessions on climate change plan, they have been pushing us for accelerated investment in infrastructure and for much greater commitment to this in the Scottish budget. On the 2nd of February at committee, Chris Stark made very clear that he felt much more action was required when it came to the delivery rather than just the future planning of projects. And he said too that he felt that the Westminster government was that little bit ahead of the Scottish government when it came to the focus on net zero projects, and therefore he was encouraging a quickening of the pace. And in this respect, effective procurement is absolutely essential, and that's something which the committee's report clearly identifies as critical when it comes to aligning the funding with infrastructure development and capital investment. The role of the new Scottish Investment Bank is extremely welcome, but it can only seed if there is the willing cooperation that I spoke about between the private, public and third sectors, and a full focus on delivering best value for money, including on a regional as well as a national basis. And that's why the circular economy is so important, something that has been commented upon significantly at committee in recent weeks by Ian Gullen, Stephen Freeland, Sarah Moyes, Andrew Misley and Chris Stark. They all spoke about the need for a much more serious approach to the circular economy. And of course, Deputy Presiding Officer, that draws into question why the Scottish Government dropped its circular economy bill after heralding it as something very important, because that hardly sends out the right signal, especially as we know that the Scottish Government's 2013 recycling target that my colleague Maurice Golden's just referred to has not been met. That, in fact, recycling rates, I think, are actually worse now than they were in 2016. And of course, the 2021 landfill ban has been delayed. But even if we have better infrastructure in place, a green economy is also about jobs and ensuring that the necessary training is put in place to ensure that we have the right skills available to sustain the green economy. And I draw members' attention to the remark made by Benny Higgins in his recent report, which was echoed by Lord Smith of Kelvin, that the Scottish Government had to do more to ensure that there was a better engagement between business and government about the necessary strategic thinking and how best to develop the skills required in the coming years. And so that means closer engagement with schools, colleges and universities, all of whom, notwithstanding the very difficult period that they're currently facing, are very much at the forefront of developing the basic skills, many of them very different to those adopted by previous generations. And I think Benny Higgins' message is critical, since it picks up a very important point, as does the committee, that there needs to be a much stronger policy coherence across different portfolios, with emphasis on low carbon projects, but also on the targets that have been set out in the climate change plan. The committee is very clear in the view that we need to do a lot more when it comes to this holistic approach, which has to be at the heart of the National Performance Framework and at the heart of the budget. Now, my colleagues will deal in more detail with both the rural and marine aspects of this recovery plan, which I think are extremely important. But can I just say that I think the issue about the regional land partnerships issue is a classic example of why there does need to be a much more holistic and integrated approach. At committee last week, the RSPB was just one of the witnesses who were questioning why the Scottish Government hasn't done a little bit more on land use strategy so that agriculture, forestry, land management are seen as part of the same coherent plan rather than in different silos. And they also questioned why regional land use partnerships were only being introduced on a pilot basis. So, Deputy Presiding Officer, can I finish my comments by reminding the Chamber that the committee was particularly strong in its recommendations, I think it was paragraph 41, that the Scottish Government had to do an awful lot better when it came to providing that there was a commitment to delivery rather than just to the plans, so that it needed to set out exactly where responsibilities lie across the sectors, and it needs to be much clearer and more realistic about its timescales when it came to presenting the shared vision. So the Scottish Conservatives are happy to commit to support the committee's report, but there's a lot more work to be done, and I think the Scottish Government needs to accept that. So thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much, Ms Smith. I call on Claudia Beamish to open for Labour. 5 minutes, please, Ms Beamish.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. As we explore our future together for the far side of these very challenging COVID times, there is a real opportunity to shape the future with a new, fairer,
way forward for the people of Scotland in the context of the climate and nature emergencies. And it's in this context I'm heartened by the wide engagement which was taken by our committee, leading to our Green Recovery report and its robust, unanimous recommendations, and identify with the remarks of our convener, Gillian Martin, today. Many of our findings and recommendations chime with those of other valuable reports and proposals, the Just Transition Commission, the STUC report, the UK Committee on Climate Change, and more, and with many of the Scottish Government recommendations as well. I want to start with our exploration of the green recovery landscape in Scotland. What do we mean by that? Is it flat, hilly, mountainous? Are there barriers to climb over? It is indeed a tough and some would say a pretty rocky track. But with the right strides, I believe we can do this together. Zero Waste Scotland very helpfully included a compendium of 270 plus green recovery recommendations made by over 20 organisations in Scotland. Some might argue that this makes for a cluttered landscape. They would, with respect, be incorrect. What this compendium demonstrates is the synergies between the wide range of respected organisations which are signposting our way to the future. The committee stresses the importance of policy coherence, as we've heard from other members today, and cross-cutting action, from the climate change plan update, the national performance framework, and the policy development and the Scottish budget. For a number of years, I've been part of the round table on the national performance framework. This group grasped the significance many years back of having cross-cutting and clear indicators. And I quote from our committee report, "We recommend that the Scottish Government provide reassurance on the national performance framework that it adequately embeds well-being and green recovery principles." While all aspects of policy and its underpinning must support the rapid shift to net zero, I want to single out two. The land use strategy, which we took strong evidence on, and we've heard from Liz Smith highlighting this already, and I've long argued it is vital that the pilot schemes are rolled out across Scotland quickly and are inclusive and with adequate funding. Understanding and buy-in will be essential. It is also vital that all land uses are evaluated and taken forward in a holistic way. And marine policies must not be overlooked, including something I've long advocated for, along with others, including Paul Wheelhouse, with the real action we need on blue carbon, starting with salt marshes, which we took evidence on in the climate change plan, actually. So the committee is robust about the opportunities presented by the climate change plan update. And I quote, "We expect to see," unquote, net zero policies as this is developed with clear pathways, not yet evident in many policy areas. For instance, it's disappointing that the Scottish Government has failed, in my view, to address fuel poverty robustly enough at this stage in the climate emergency. And Scottish Labour is calling for radical action now. This investment could be doubled to at least 244 million for the coming year to see a step change that really is good for fuel poverty, the tackling of fuel poverty and bringing local skilled jobs, preventing rising long-term costs and tangibly improving the lives of our communities, rural and urban. So turning to just transition, our committee recommendation 32 stresses this must be at the heart of the green recovery, prioritising the most vulnerable and those whose paid employment is likely to be adversely affected by the transition. And further, I cannot emphasise enough, along with other members, our recommendation on the circular economy, and I quote, "This approach to procurement and to the future will help increase local jobs through repair, manufacturing, reuse and leasing opportunities." And we will hear more from Sarah Boyack on this. I want to reinforce, finally, our recommendations on finance by highlighting the importance of conditionality and also the Scottish Investment Bank. And private investment will be vital as well. So today I call on all MSPs, fellow committees, particularly councillors, policymakers, businesses, trade unions and educators, everyone in civic society, in fact everyone, to read and please reflect on this important committee report, leading to collective action for a green recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Beamish. I call on Liam MacArthur to open the Liberal Democrats. 4 minutes, please, Mr MacArthur.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Let me start by extending my thanks to Gillian Martin and members of the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform Committee for their work, aided by witnesses and support staff in producing what I think is a detailed and insightful report. As we come to the end of this session of Parliament and look ahead to a new one starting later this year, it's increasingly clear some of the most profound and challenging choices and decisions in Scotland's history will fall to the incoming generation of decision makers. Because the world is on the brink of irreparable damage, decisions made over the course of the next 10 years, probably less, will either make or break our planet. The climate emergency is beyond dispute. 2020 began with apocalyptic wildfires in Australia, declared amongst the worst wildlife disasters in modern history. Extreme weather and the fires, floods and droughts that follow are becoming more and more commonplace. While a global average sea level rise of more than 3 millimetres per year over the past 2 decades has alarm bells ringing. Scottish Liberal Democrats have long recognised the threat posed, as well as the urgency and ambition of action needed to combat that threat. We've been instrumental in forcing the pace of change, playing our part in ensuring that Scotland now has some of the most challenging emissions reduction targets in the world. Those targets push us to the brink of what is currently possible. Chris Stark, the Chief Executive of the UK Committee on Climate Change, recently described the 2030 target as, quote, very, very stretching. The challenge may seem daunting, but the pandemic has been a timely lesson in what radical change really means. COVID-19 has shown everyone what is possible when public interest and political will demands it. We've seen how a global emergency should inform and influence decisions at every level, so that what happens on the ground reflects the best of our intentions. That transition from ambition into action must now be seen if we are to address the climate emergency. As Benny Higgins reminds us, the test is not in writing it down, the test is in doing it. Scotland already knows what happens when these issues drop down the political agenda. 10 years ago, the SNP promised 28,000 green jobs, with Scotland becoming a world manufacturing base for offshore renewables. Last year, contracts for 114 wind turbine platforms for the Outer Forth estuary were awarded. A Scottish Yard bid for just 4 of them and didn't get any. All 114 will be made in the Middle East and China. And Scotland missed its emissions reduction target for 2018. So while the SNP's rhetoric and promises are world-leading, their delivery so far has failed to fully walk the talk. As we move to ensure our ambitious legislation results in ambitious action, Scottish Liberal Democrats will continue to play a constructive role. We've done so in pushing for greater action on electric vehicles, warm homes, plastic pollution, and will continue to do so across the range of areas where progress is desperately needed. We've also held the government to account on their support for policies like a third runway at Heathrow, which flies in the face of tackling the climate emergency. Deputy Presiding Officer, we need a detailed route map for every sector and every area, costed, funded and realistic. What we don't need is a list of excuses about why promises aren't delivered and how everything would be solved with the wave of a constitutional wand. I thank the committee again and look forward to playing my part in the delivery of the actions set out in this report.
Thank you very much, Ms MacArthur. And I call on Mark Ruskell to open for the Green Party. 4 minutes, please, Mr Ruskell.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. After Scotland emerged from the first COVID lockdown last spring, I think it became clear that there were many who could learn from that experience. Alongside the turmoil, the economic uncertainty and the pain of the pandemic, we'd rediscovered the resilience of our communities. We'd also found solace in our connection with nature, and our daily need for travel had been redefined as a need for access. Suddenly, bandwidth was a more limiting factor than traffic congestion, and with clearer streets and skies, building the confidence in all ages to walk and cycle again. But one of the biggest lessons was that when faced with an existential crisis, governments acted. And major mistakes were made along the way, but the intervention by the state was of a scale not seen since the Second World War. And COVID, I think in many ways, has been a dress rehearsal for what is to come with a climate emergency, albeit the challenges and changes will be on a far greater scale. COVID has also shown that when faced with a crisis, inequalities often widen. For those with insecure work, that insecurity got deeper. For young people struggling to find a path in life, the climb out of poverty has got that bit steeper now. And it's inequality that lies at the heart of the climate emergency too, with the richest 1% responsible for more emissions than the poorest half of the world. That cry for global climate justice cannot be ignored. And alongside it, a plan for just transition so that no workers are left behind is imperative for the industrialised world. But never at any time in our history has it been more important to shift to a well-being economy that enables all of us to live within the boundaries of our planet while ensuring the basic needs of everyone are met. But it will take more than a TED talk from the First Minister. It needs a big shift in thinking and a big shift in governance. The government should start by scrapping GDP economic growth as its central goal. It should set up a Future Generations Commission, as Wales has done, to demand coherent policy decisions that leave a better world to the next generation. A green recovery cannot be undermined by incoherent policies and budgets that lock in climate emissions and store up costly problems. The days of the Scottish Government justifying a massive trunk road expansion programme because there's a cycle path running alongside it must come to an end. Investment in low carbon infrastructure, whether that's for electric buses, active travel or efficient buildings, must be front loaded in budgets. Build it and they will come. But at the moment, only 36% of infrastructure spend is low carbon. This has to rise to 70, even 80% if we're to avoid missing climate change targets. And that's why the Scottish Greens published our Rail for All report last month, because big visionary thinking is needed if we're to make rail the natural choice for travel. From improved intercity services to new stations, including Newburgh, St Andrews, Clackmannan and Kincardine, our costed plan would deliver jobs and economic benefit. Presiding Officer, the committee report poses major challenges to this government about its vision, about how policies are formulated, and about how budgets prioritise action that is coherent for the future. But the early response to the report from government is disappointing. It appears to just be a dump of policy examples. I get no sense that there's a major shift in thinking from government, and many of the more searching recommendations have been ignored. Yes, this Parliament needs more fiscal powers so we can choose our path and invest in the future, but we won't win the case for more powers with a paucity of vision. The time for tinkering around the edges is over. COVID has opened our eyes to what is possible and what is necessary. All that remains is our will to rise to the challenge of a green recovery and make it happen.
Thank you very much. I turn to the open debate. Speeches of 4 minutes. Joan McAlpine, followed by Peter Chapman.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I congratulate the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform Committee on their inquiry and report, which I see was published last November and has already begun to help shape our agenda in terms of the Green Draft Budget. We were already planning our green future before COVID came along, and given the choice, that's the place we would all have preferred to stay. Unfortunately, the virus did not give us a choice, so we must now plan the green recovery in that context. And that's why I very much welcome the immediate and urgent action taken by Kate Forbes in the draft budget, which invests a record £1.9 billion in tackling climate change and creating good green jobs. It's particularly heartening that green jobs have been prioritised despite the significant financial challenges of COVID-19, delays to the UK budget and the UK government spending review worsening our capital position. For example, I note that the committee's report on green recovery, that one of their conclusions notes that Ofgem sets price controls and influences investment and profit levels across the gas and electricity market. And I note that the committee wants to see Ofgem invest in and enable the swift development of infrastructure and the energy network to effectively deliver low carbon transition. But Ofgem work within a policy framework set by the UK government in answer to UK ministers, and I welcome the committee's acknowledgement of that fact. The committee heard the energy transition in relation to heat and transport poses one of the biggest challenges the Scottish economy faces as reliance on oil and gas shifts to renewable energy. and hydrogen technologies. And I agree with the committee report that for it to be a just transition, new skills, technology and infrastructure will be required on a bold scale. I therefore welcome the launch of the Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan, along with the Climate Change Plan update, which will ensure the skills system supports people to access these jobs through advice, skills and retraining. And note that this includes establishing a Green Jobs Workforce Academy. I also welcome the new £180 million Emerging Technology Fund and look forward to some of that investment coming to the area of Scotland I represent, which has already established itself as a leader in green technology. For example, last summer I was honoured to help open a new £1.8 million green energy hub at Dumfries and Galloway College, thanks to funding from SP Energy Networks Green Economy Fund with support from the Scottish Funding Council. The hub will promote sustainable economic growth, increased air quality and other aspects of environmental forward planning, and allow access to a significant range of practical solutions to the challenges of heating, power and water supply. Flagship education programmes such as this help power the next generation of sustainability experts and will create the workforce of the future. And I also wanted to draw attention to the work of the Crichton Carbon Centre in Dumfries and Galloway, whose expertise includes advising on peatland restoration. And I very much welcome the Government's climate change plan being committed to delivering an ambitious 10-year, £250 million peatland restoration plan by 2025. Restoring degraded peatland makes an essential contribution to sequestering carbon and to protecting biodiversity, and it can also catalyse the creation and development of land-based jobs and skills in rural and remote communities across Scotland. The Crichton Carbon Centre provides free condition assessments, site surveys and planning, and can help all aspects of funding applications, and the project is of course supported through the Government's Peatland Action. Therefore, in conclusion, Presiding Officer, I welcome the committee report and congratulate them again on their work, and I also welcome the Government's action to ensure a green recovery is at the heart of the 2020-21 programme for Government and the Climate Change Plan update. And I look forward to all areas of Scotland, including my own area of the south of Scotland, benefiting from the green recovery and green jobs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I call Peter Chapman to be followed by Stuart Stevenson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I welcome the opportunity to speak in this debate. I am sure there is total agreement across the Chamber that few things are as important as tackling the climate, ecological and biodiversity emergencies and finding ways of mitigating their disastrous consequences. Presiding Officer, having read the Eclair Committee report, I am surprised at its silence on the marine environment. And I am shocked at the lack of ambition on marine issues from the Scottish Government. The UK is a proud maritime nation, and having just left the EU and the Common Fisheries Policy, we now have the opportunity and the responsibility to design a management regime for our fishing industry with ambitious, practical and measurable targets with sustainability at its heart. Now, not everyone realises, but farmed salmon is Scotland's biggest food export, and its quality is world-renowned. So I would have thought this industry would have been another priority for the Scottish Government's green agenda. To omit the marine environment in this green recovery is ignorant at best and downright dangerous at worst. The importance of a healthy, balanced marine ecosystem cannot be overstated, and the Scottish Government must do more to establish a risk-based approach to fisheries management in Scotland. Having left the restrictive CFP, the Scottish Government has an opportunity to set maximum sustainable yields for all important species, thus ensuring the long-term future for our fishermen and the health of the marine environment. However, there has been complete silence from the Scottish Government on this issue, and this is simply not good enough. Hand in hand with setting sustainable catch limits is the issue of tackling discards in a workable manner. There is much we could learn from the Norwegian system in this regard. Discarding is wasteful and undermines efforts to fish at sustainable levels. And there is a pressing need for the Scottish Government to do the work and come up with a plan. Presiding Officer, the recovery plan also needs to address our declining marine biodiversity. Warming sea temperatures have meant that organisms such as zooplankton and sand eels have been driven northwards. And sand eels are a key prey species for fish and seabirds. Recent figures showed in 2020 Danish fishermen caught over 240,000 tonnes of sand eels, all going straight to fish meal. No wonder that there is now good evidence that declines in the abundance of sand eels has reduced the breeding success of seabirds right round our coasts. The health of our seabird population is a good bellwether in assessing the biodiversity and health of the marine environment, and it does not look good by any measure. The SNP keep making grand promises to tackle the climate crisis, but time and again they miss targets and fail to deliver. Recent REC committee meetings, which I sit on, have taken evidence on climate change. And one of the issues that has become apparent is that while the SNP are good at setting targets, they are severely lacking on detail on how to actually achieve them. However, at least there are targets. As a proud maritime nation, it is a disgrace that there are not even targets for marine issues. Presiding Officer, in conclusion, there must be a renewed focus on our seas, included in the green recovery, with sustainability at the heart of any approach. This is the only way we can address the environmental and ecological challenges and ensure the future of marine species and the future of our fishermen and our coastal communities. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Chapman. I now call Stuart Stevenson to be followed by Sarah Boyack.
Presiding Officer, a very brave speech by Peter Chapman from the Tory benches on the subject of fishing, while so many fishing companies around many of our rural communities are going out of business as a result of Tory actions. But I want to focus on perhaps some other matters, and I will start by thanking the clerks and their advisers in the committee for their very considerable input to the report that's now before Parliament today. There are a number of things in the report that it's important perhaps to focus on. One is conditionality, is the subject that we discussed. As we support companies from government and our enterprise agencies, we need to tie into that support more conditionality that will relate to a green agenda and creating economy for the long term. Investment opportunities are there. The Scottish National Investment Bank is a new vehicle that will help, and I know will have this as part of its important priorities. But we also need wider state investment and private capital. But of course, much of the private capital that will come in to support the green economy will do so because there are economic returns for that private capital. And that's one of the things we have to make sure that we're telling people about. Just today, we've got very heavy snow in the north of Banffshire. We were able to get out and get our COVID jabs today. Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary for Health. But 2 deliveries have been turned away because they couldn't get their vehicles in to see us. But the one thing I can see is that on our roof, we have snow on our roof. And why do we have snow on our roof? Because we took our insulation in the loft up from 200 millimetres to 600 millimetres. The government paid for that. Thank you, government. And therefore, there is no heat going up to melt the snow on our roof. Not all the houses we passed on way down to Macduff were similarly insulated. So some of the actions that we need to take are very local actions, very simple, straightforward, not high-tech actions, but with huge benefits. And of course, the benefit to us of taking that action was a halving in the cost of heating our house, a halving of that cost. And many of the good things that we as individuals can be doing have benefits. If we drive fewer miles, we spend less money. If we walk, we're healthier and we spend less money on being unhealthy. If we cycle, that's a good way to travel and again promotes a healthy agenda for each and every one of us. Now, one of the things that I have to say is, of course, that the COVID crisis has illustrated how flexible, responsive and effective government and the civil servants who work in government can be when faced with a challenge. Relieved of perhaps some of the narrow constraints, told to just get on with it, we've had a magnificent response right across the public sector, not simply in Scottish Government, but in parts of UK Government, but more fundamentally in local government. Because many of the decisions that really will make a difference on this agenda will have to be made locally, looking at local needs, looking at local requirements. Because the needs in the central Glasgow are fundamentally different from the needs in a rural community in my constituency and across Scotland, and in more remote local communities with only a few houses and limited roads. So, Presiding Officer, we're making the kind of progress we need to. The agenda is now a shared one right across Parliament, I believe, and I commend this report from our committee to Parliament.
Thank you very much. I now call Sarah Boyack to be followed by Angus MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. It's great we're having this debate this afternoon, and I think it's vital that our response, both to the economic crisis and our climate emergency, needs to link into bold action to deliver a more equal society as we recover from the pandemic. And that means using procurement to deliver long-term local jobs and training opportunities. And the exciting energy efficiency programme mentioned by Claudia Beamish would be an excellent way to kickstart a green recovery, because it's work that's already out there, but it would be ramping up significantly. I was really glad to see in the committee's report that recognition is being given to the role of localised procurement, and that's been mentioned by a few colleagues across the chamber today. And I think the key point that was made that about new procurement models are needed and a fundamental shift away from procuring at the lowest cost to a holistic approach which takes the whole life costs of investment and intervention, fiscal, social, environmental costs and benefits right across the public sector. And as others have said, it's a big issue for local councils too. So, in advance of COP26, we should be looking right across the public sector. For example, for supplying clothing for our NHS, we need to think about procurement. What is the source of these products? How sustainable is the production? And how do we support affordable, ethical products? Then there's food procurement, and we've seen a lot of progress in Scotland in the past, but there's still much more can be done to ensure sustainable food production that links into local businesses and public sector organisations like the NHS and our councils across Scotland, and critically for food that is locally sourced and affordable. Another issue that nobody's mentioned today, but I think should be part of this agenda, is the whole agenda of community wealth building. The Labour-led North Ayrshire Council is an excellent example of where you can see political leadership that links into public sector procurement to improve the social, environmental and economic well-being of their council area. Last month, they approved proposals for a council-owned solar farm that will generate 34% of the council's pre-COVID energy needs and will deliver a financial surplus of almost £13 million, which they reinvest in North Ayrshire. They're also looking at a second solar farm site and are exploring opportunities in wind power, hydrogen and battery technology as we look towards the 2030 targets. But they're also delivering sustainable income streams. So these are really practical achievements on the ground, and they build on the community renewables and co-ops that we've seen in our rural communities for years now, generating local benefits led by local communities. But there's so much more that can be done. If I just give you the example of the Edinburgh Solar Co-op, it is a model that should be followed across Scotland. Our school buildings have solar panels on the roof, and there's now investment being made in our schools and community projects. So I'm glad to see the Scottish Government's heat and building strategy looks at achieving net zero emissions in our buildings in Scotland. It does reference the past experience we've had in Scotland, the importance of using positive business models to support community-led development. But I think where we are now is we know what works. We've got good examples in our local communities. They just need to happen everywhere. Every single local council needs to be kick-starting projects like that. And I hope the Scottish Government's investment will actually feed through to the local communities so that they can deliver. Another key area that I think is critical is public transport recovery, giving people real choices to be able to shift from their cars onto public transport. Something, if anyone else listens to GMS every morning, you hear about. We've still got traffic jams in Scotland where people are not going to work in the same levels. So there's something about kick-starting public sector transport again. I note that the Welsh Labour Government has just taken their railway companies into public ownership. And sitting alongside rail is bus companies. We've got the Lothian buses model. Why don't we have that across Scotland? I know the Scottish Government's got its bus fund. We've got the legislative competence through the Transport Act. Can we make that part of our green recovery? And to help deliver 20-minute neighbourhoods, it is the concept of the moment, but it means remaking our town centres, investing in retail and hospitality, reusing exempted buildings and creating new homes. And that would be a green recovery. Using existing buildings is environmentally hugely important. Delivering local jobs, delivering training. Again, local procurement, local initiative, supported by Scottish Government investment, something we should all be able to support.
Thank you.
Let's get on with this, because we know it can be done. Thank you, President.
I was enjoying your speech, but you went on too long. You see, that's the problem. But there you go. I call Angus MacDonald to be followed by Jamie Halcrow-Johnson.
Thank you, President Officer. I'm pleased to contribute to this debate on the week that it was confirmed Scotland's carbon footprint has hit another record low, with analysis by the Scottish Government showing Scotland's carbon footprint fell by 30% between 2007 and 2017, compared with a 21% decrease in the rest of the UK. Over the 10-year period of SNP governance, Scotland's greenhouse gas emissions have fallen by 30.4 million tonnes of CO2, or the equivalent emissions of nearly 400,000 lorry loads of fuel. So that's what you call progress, but that progress should not detract from the urgency of addressing the climate emergency in tandem with our green recovery. And of course, as we've already heard, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused sudden and dramatic changes to our way of life, and every single person and every single industry has felt the effects. The COVID-19 crisis hasn't reduced the urgency of addressing climate change, but has created an imperative to ensure that the necessary economic recovery is sustainable. And the green recovery allows us to link in both economic and environmental advantages of investment in a sustainable recovery. However, we need to make sure the transition happens in a way that leaves no one behind. And of course, the need to get that work underway now is also imperative. Now, our Eclair Committee report states that for the just transition to take place and be successful, new skills, technology and infrastructure will be required at a scale that has not yet been seen. This includes investment in carbon capture and storage, and while there's much debate about the inclusion of CCS in the CCU, there is no doubt in my mind that it has to be part of the equation, not least because I'm a member representing Falkirk East, where Grangemouth sits, emitting 33% of the total emissions from companies in Scotland, or in a related statistic, 8% of Scotland's emissions, but only 2.9% of the total population. So you can understand, President Officer, why the Scottish Government, Falkirk Council and major industry players, including INEOS, are keen to develop plans for carbon capture and utilisation schemes in Grangemouth as part of the green recovery. Now, I'm pleased to say that INEOS do engage closely with Falkirk Council locally in taking measures which will help in reducing carbon emitted from the site. Actions already include investment in a new energy plant, replacement of flaring equipment, upgrades to the KG cracker, and they have been actively engaged in the investment zone and, of course, carbon capture and utilisation schemes. Now, while I've put on record my disappointment that INEOS have not engaged directly with the Parliament's scrutiny of the updated climate change plan, it is fair to say they've engaged indirectly via the Chemical Industry Association, who INEOS believe can give a broader industry input. Now, it's also fair to say that the petrochemical industries are key, not only to our local economy in Falkirk District, but also to the Scottish and UK economies. Our economy in Falkirk District has a symbiotic relationship with Scotland's oil and gas sector, and we must accept the need to support these industries through this immediate crisis and recovery, as well as looking to the longer term and developing a new, greener industrial base in Grangemouth. And of course, it's worth pointing out that Scottish industry would become less competitive if it were required to decarbonise at a faster pace than competitors, and there's a risk that this would lead to offshoring of operations, which clearly is the last thing anyone would want. So in closing, Presiding Officer, we have learned from the pandemic that the new normal must reflect the need to build wealth and resilience into local economies. It should have a strong focus on promoting carbon reduction and in reinforcing the value of place and how people engage with the spaces around them as lockdown eases. In my view, Falkirk District typifies the risks and opportunities post-COVID-19, and that there are opportunities for my Falkirk East constituency to act as a demonstrator for the transition. There are potential early wins around the significant investment plans of local industry to modernise its infrastructure, creating new energy generation potential and upgrading assets. So I look forward, Presiding Officer, to the work of the newly formed Grangemouth Future Industry Board proceeding at pace, and Grangemouth Industry's keenness to be part of the just transition and the green recovery recognised and embraced as we move towards net zero by 2045. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Jamie Halker-Johnson to be followed by John Mason. Mr Halker-Johnson, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I remind members of my register of interest as a partner in a farming business? And can I also start by welcoming the consensus around the Chamber for an economic recovery that doesn't jeopardise progress towards positive environmental outcomes. The position that we find ourselves is unprecedented. Large parts of our economy have been shut down and considerable restrictions have been placed on the day-to-day lives of individuals. There is a clear imperative to recover, to build back better. Jobs that have been safeguarded in the short term must be there in the long term too. Businesses which are being kept barely afloat must return to provide incomes and livelihoods. But it's right to consider that it comes at a time when we already face significant changes in how our economy relates to our natural environment. The risk, if both processes are not well managed, is that the combination of economic shift and shock may well create an equally unprecedented risk. This is also the year that the COP26 conference will come to Glasgow, and Scotland's and the wider UK's positions on climate change will be increasingly under the spotlight. The Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform Committee's report is an important piece of work that requires detailed consideration. It outlines many of the issues that have been tackled if progress is now made on reaching the ambitious climate change targets that this Chamber has agreed. Sadly, the report notes where progress has fallen short in better times. It notes, and I quote, consistent and significant concerns that existing policies that are relevant in supporting a green recovery are not being appropriately implemented. We know all too well that progress against key environmental targets has been slow. As my party's rural spokesman, I'm mindful of the role that the rural economy will have to play. Scotland's agricultural sector are keenly aware that future progress will have an impact on how we operate. One of the main points made by the committee was a need for future clarity in a world beyond the common agricultural policy. This has been an area where, across this Parliament, there has been dissatisfaction with a lack of direction and leadership from the Scottish Government. There are commitments to align future rural support with climate commitments. This is a sound use of support funding, but how this will be achieved remains largely a mystery, the consequences of kicking the issue further down the road. Similar alignment should be achieved across other areas, including continued support for agri-environment schemes that promote decarbonisation. In many ways, rural Scotland risks being left behind by national change if adequate consideration is not given to its particular needs. It's also worth considering some of the sectoral issues that the report raises in that light. The committee speaks about the needs around renewable heat, but this chamber should also recognise the proportion of off-grid properties that remain in regions like the Highlands and Islands, often operating on more polluting fuels and at greater cost to occupiers. All the levels of fuel poverty that can exist in our rural communities, especially some that I represent. By 2020, 11% of non-electrical heat demand was supposed to be provided by renewables. That's not transformational, but it would have represented a positive first step had that goal been realised. On transport, the committee had quite properly underlined needs around active travel and public transport, but that makes little sense to communities where services are distant and local bus connections have been cut back to the bone. With a shift towards electric vehicles, there is little indication that the infrastructure will be in place to match that rollout in more densely populated parts of the country. And in all of this, we should recognise missed opportunities. It's been extremely disappointing that renewable has often not benefited the Scottish supply chain, that more has not been done to support green jobs in Scotland. The SNP's talk of 28,000 green jobs by 2020 was not realised, and a great deal of work went overseas. A green recovery must be focused on making a positive contribution to our economy. Presiding Officer, there is a real opportunity to rebuild more positively after damage and harm caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. This has not just been harm to our economy and the expenditure devoted to keeping businesses and jobs available, but also the cost in lives and opportunities. To ignore the vital role of our environment in our recovery will be a false economy, and unless handled seriously, will set Scotland back even further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call John Mason to be followed by Willie Coffey. Mr Coffey is the last speaker in the open debate. Mr Mason, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I do thank the committee for the report and the amount of work that has obviously gone into it. I confess I'm not a member of the committee and I came to it somewhat late in the day, and so I'm just going to focus on a few particular aspects, and that is transport, which one or two members, including Sarah Boyack, have already mentioned. I was particularly interested in the section on transport, not least because of my involvement in the cross-party group on rail. And during this current lockdown, I think in contrast to last spring, I've heard several people noting how busy the roads are. Yet in contrast, the trains are still incredibly quiet. Gone, at least for the time being, are the packed commuter trains with people pouring out at Queen Street in Glasgow or Edinburgh Park. So this raises a few questions in my mind. Firstly, will we see a permanent switch to more home working and therefore less commuting as we leave the pandemic behind? Or will the social aspect and the opportunity for less formal interaction with colleagues draw people back to their offices? Another area, as people clearly feel safer from the virus in their cars rather than in public transport, can we turn this around and get people back onto the trains and onto the buses? And if so, how long will that process take? We have all got into quite a habit now of keeping our distance from other people. Will that change back, or is there a permanent element to some of this? And thirdly, on a related subject, what will happen to our city centres? They have been focused in recent years on office workers coming in Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Then others have gone into the city centres for shopping and leisure in the evenings and weekends. I have to say I would not like to predict answers to these questions, but they are pretty fundamental and will guide our budget spending, as well as planning and other policies. I note that the committee suggests changes to the coming year's budget, but I do actually wonder if it is still too soon for major changes in direction when we are still in a period of lockdown and uncertain about the future. Last summer, when things opened up, some people did return quickly to restaurants, the cinema and such like, but others did not. And I just wonder if it's still too early to say what, if any, the long-term changes in behaviour will be. Because depending on the long-term trends, our shorter-term investment decisions will need to change. If we want people out of petrol and diesel cars and into electric cars, we should focus on charging points and improving roads, and perhaps using car batteries as storage for excess electricity capacity, which in turn would impact on the national grid. But if we want people out of all cars and onto public transport, then we should invest more in bus development and rail infrastructure, like reopening closed rail lines, as we have been doing. But then again, if we want people to live and work closer to home, should we be investing in transport infrastructure at all? Now, I hasten to point out I'm not arguing against investment in transport infrastructure, but it is a question that I think we need to ask. These are just some of the questions that come to my mind, and I suspect the answers to these questions are not going to be black and white. We will probably end up somewhere in the middle with compromises round about most of them. Just to touch on another couple of aspects, I note the references to the Scottish National Investment Bank, and in its response the government points out that the primary mission of SNIB is the transition to net zero. I also note the committee's desire to increase the amount of finance the bank has available to invest, and that is certainly a laudable aim. However, Westminster's financial transaction money has been a key for the bank's funding, and that particular source is being severely cut back for the year 21-22. Finally, the new UK Shared Prosperity Fund is also mentioned, but the indications seem to be that Westminster wants to use this as something of an advertising tool for itself, and so the chances of any investment from there being aligned with this Parliament's desire for a green recovery are probably sadly reduced. So I thank the committee for the report and touching on such a wide range of issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call Willie Coffey, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to Gillian Martin and the committee for such a thorough and positive report. I wonder, though, if Peter Chapman actually read a single page of the committee's report instead of rubbishing the efforts of the committee, including his own members' contribution to it. I'm sure they'll be delighted with that. The report, though, chimes with much of the work being done at our own Economy Committee, where we've been taking a close look at the Climate Change Update Plan, and in particular energy and local heat networks, and how these issues can help us advance the green economy. From climate change to COVID, we're certainly facing some difficult challenges ahead, and I hope that one of those challenges is to also think differently, if we can, about how we do things in the future. Whilst the committee agreed with the basic principles set out by the Climate Change Committee to underpin a green recovery, I was pleased to see them go a little bit further and embed well-being and there needing to be a just transition and human rights aspect at the heart of the Green Recovery Programme in Scotland. Of course, we aren't starting from scratch. Here in Scotland, we're already well placed to deliver this agenda in many aspects. We already lead the world. We aim to be net zero by 2045, of course, and carbon neutral by 2040. And we're including a fair share of emissions from international aviation and shipping in these targets. We want to phase out petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2032, and to achieve it, we'll provide electrical charging points on our motorways, whilst doubling our investments in active travel. To help us get there, we're looking for a 43% reduction in industrial emissions by 2032, and that's a tall order, since it's the difficult stuff that's still left to do. Professor Hazeldine told us at the Economy Committee last week that our beer fermentation and whisky distilling industries emit about 500,000 tonnes CO2 every year, which isn't captured, of course. So not just government, but industries have a vital role to play in the transition to net zero. In terms of energy, by 2019, we already generate 90% of our electricity consumption from renewable sources, so good progress is being made. Financing the green recovery is, of course, fundamental to having any chance of success, and the committee rightly focused in on that, asking the government to make sure that it aligns with all of its spending plans, its objectives, and particularly to its green recovery objectives. The budget proposals just announced will see a record £1.9 billion invested in tackling the climate change emergency and creating sustainable green jobs. Locally in Ayrshire, we're doing our bit too, with a number of innovative projects in the Green Growth Deal that will help take the green agenda forward. Our world-leading HALO project in Kilmarnock will operate on its 28-acre site, powered by electricity with a net zero carbon footprint. And the National Energy Research Demonstrator project in Cumnock is also looking at local energy and storage solutions to help that community to become energy self-sufficient. Presiding Officer, there has been some great work done already, and of course much to do, including making faster progress on carbon capture and storage. I wonder if I may suggest in my time left that the Green Recovery Group called for by the committee does emerge, that it gives some consideration to one aspect that has been raised time and again by the many young people we have spoken to during our COVID deliberations, and that is to ask governments and businesses to seriously think about where people can and will work in the future. We have excellent and fast improving digital technologies at our disposal, and one of the many lessons we are learning from our COVID experience is that we no longer need to clog up our motorways to rush into our main cities every day to work in expensive, power-hungry buildings. Young people finally want to live and work in their own communities, and they expect us as leaders and the business community to take this seriously. What a wonderful opportunity we now have to take this forward within the Green Recovery Programme, and with that, Presiding Officer, I would commend the committee on producing a fine report.
Thank you very much. I now call closing speeches. Now call Alec Rowley to close for Labour. 5 minutes, please, Mr. Rowley.
Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform Committee debate today on the Green Recovery Inquiry. I would firstly like to pass on my gratitude to the members of the committee for the work they have done in producing the report, and for all those who gave evidence and provided written submissions, and as always to the clerks who put in such hard work. As has been said by my colleagues, we welcome this inquiry, and as the Labour Party, we support its recommendations. Now more than ever, the aim to build a more resilient, just and healthy society and environment should be supported and put at the forefront of any government strategy for how we build back from this COVID pandemic. I would like to touch on the recommendations in the report which call on the Scottish Government to, and I quote, prioritise the delivery of skills development for a green recovery in communities that lack capacity and resources, establish a development fund to facilitate this and support the mobilisation of communities with further and sustained investment. I have made the case repeatedly, Presiding Officer, in the Chamber to the Scottish Government that if we are to focus on establishing a greener economy, then we must absolutely prioritise the development of skills and jobs. We have seen a multitude of failures from the Government in this regard, not meeting green job promises, seeing work shipped overseas, and a failure to establish a green jobs economy here in Scotland on the scale that we have the potential for. However, moving past those failures, there is no excuse for allowing the post-COVID recovery not to focus on these areas. We all know that Scotland has massive potential for successful green recovery, but that recovery will need leadership through planning and financial commitments from the Scottish Government. The COVID crisis has put the inequalities in our country at the forefront, and those inequalities will only become more severe during the course of this year. There is no doubt in anyone's mind that the recovery is going to be difficult, but we must focus our attention on delivering a recovery that tackles the inequalities and poverty that leave so many people and communities behind. The committee recommended in the report that a green recovery route map is needed to signpost the way through the challenges ahead, and I would agree with that approach. Clear timelines, clear responsibilities for delivering across all parts of the public sector, and clear delivery plans for each sector will help steer the direction of the recovery and allow transparency in the government strategy, something that will be essential when legitimate criticism or concerns are rightly made to ensure that we work together to make the recovery work. The recovery will need input from across civic Scotland, from the government to opposition parties, from the public and private sector expertise, and from the communities that are or will be impacted. By taking a collaborative approach, we can pool our resources to ensure the recovery is the most effective one that we can deliver. Friends of the Earth have called for a scaling up on energy efficiency programmes, and I would say this is desperately needed given the fuel poverty we have in Scotland, as is their call for expanding bus travel with green buses, which again we could build in Scotland. All of this the government can begin to put in place right now. And I believe there is an absolute need for a national housing plan that once and for all tackles Scotland's housing crisis, creating thousands of apprenticeships and tens of thousands of jobs. It cannot be jobs against the environment, but it must be jobs, 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 leading the environmental challenge that we face. So we must move from the rhetoric of transition to the creation of new jobs across the country. Otherwise, this challenge will fail. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Rowley. And I call on Maurice Golden to close for the Conservatives. 5 minutes, Mr Golden.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I refer members to my register of interests. I welcome the committee report and thank the members, clerks and witnesses for their efforts in producing it. Even where there are disagreements over how we achieve a green recovery, it has been encouraging to see members united in their support for that principle today. Gillian Martin spoke about being bold and an increasing commitment to climate change, and I wholeheartedly agree. Ben McPherson spoke about a whole government approach, and that is a strategy which must be fulfilled. Deputy Presiding Officer, a green recovery is not just about meeting our net zero goals, important as they are. It is about making Scotland more resilient to future shocks. That work must start in our local communities, and I am pleased to see the committee report making a number of recommendations on this front, covering local decision-making, procurement and skills and childcare. These are key components for creating a circular economy, retaining local wealth creation and generating green jobs. Equally important to a green recovery is the recommendation to lock in low-carbon behaviours and retain the socio-economic benefits of natural capital. Both are beneficial at the community level for climate change and individual well-being, but also vital at the national level for reaching net zero and protecting jobs. That is because Scotland's vast natural capital, worth an estimated £23 billion to the economy, is vital for key industries such as agriculture, food and drink, and tourism and hospitality. So, protecting our natural capital is protecting the thousands of jobs those industries support. Jamie Halcrow-Johnson highlighted the important role agriculture will play, and I would support a protein plan to work with farmers to achieve our climate targets. I welcome the Scottish Government's ambitious climate targets to do that, but unfortunately, those targets are not being met, as my colleague Liz Smith mentioned earlier. Happy to.
Minister.
Thank you. Would Mr Golden acknowledge that the CCC in their 2020 Scottish Progress Report stated that the Scottish economy has decarbonised more quickly than the rest of the UK and faster than any G20 economy since 2008? Yes, there's more work to do, but great progress has been made.
Maurice Golden.
I agree that progress has been made, and thanks to the UK Government's electricity market has allowed the expansion of renewables here in Scotland, and that is absolutely wonderful. But let's not forget, according to the Climate Emergency Response Group, over two-thirds of key climate policies are not on track. I'd like to make some progress in a relatively short speech. The committee report also mentions consistent and significant concerns over policy implementation, and Friends of the Earth go so far as to say the SNP's climate plan doesn't add up. Put simply, there have been significant failures with numerous environmental targets and promises. Deputy Presiding Officer, I do not doubt the good intentions of ministers, but to borrow a phrase, the facts are the facts are the facts. Just look at the list of targets the SNP have missed. Their emissions target failed. Their 2013 household recycling target failed. Their fuel poverty target failed. Their renewable heat target failed. Their 28,000 green jobs target failed. But, Deputy Presiding Officer, it gets worse because progress is, in many areas, going backwards. Source emissions actually increased between 2017 and 2018. The recycling rate is worse now than it was in 2016. And they are turning Scotland into the ashtray of Europe, with incineration capacity up almost 400%. And that final statistic suggests the SNP have abandoned the use of biostabilisation of waste. Numerous studies show that biostabilisation before landfilling to be the lowest carbon option for residual
Members
waste.
in his last minute, Minister.
I welcome Zero Waste Scotland's report on the subject and hope that the SNP will take on board its findings, incorporating the modelling changes which I raised. There is goodwill across this chamber to help ministers turn this situation around, but only if they reflect on the committee's report, focus on delivering results, not rhetoric, and get this green recovery started.
Thank you, Mr Gold. I now call on Fiona Hislop to close for the Government. Cabinet Secretary, please, 6 minutes.
I'd like to thank all the MSPs for their perspectives, or perhaps not that latter one, which completely missed the tone and tenor of the rest of the debate, which was positive and constructive, and for the perspectives that we've heard from everybody in relation to the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform Committee's report. And I want to thank them for their work and their report. It has been and is a valuable contribution that will continue to inform Scotland's green recovery plans. Now, many people are currently in highly challenging circumstances due to the pandemic, and while we continue to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, we must keep working to ensure a strong recovery from the pandemic, one that responds to the urgency of the climate emergency while building that greener, fairer future for Scotland and capturing the economic and wider opportunities for our transition to net zero. Now, the Scottish economy has much to gain in leading the transition to a low-carbon economy, and our Economic Recovery Implementation Plan aims to capitalise on those opportunities. And investment at the scale needed to meet our net zero emissions target can deliver long-term sustainable economic growth opportunities in domestic and global markets, from buildings and energy to products and services. And that must be and will be with a whole government approach. We already invest £1.8 billion of capital each year in low-carbon policies and programmes. We've committed to increasing the level of spending by an additional £2 billion over the next 5 years, and these commitments are outlined in the Climate Change Plan update. Furthermore, our infrastructure investment plan, just announced on Thursday, supports a green recovery by setting out a clear vision for our future infrastructure to support and enable an inclusive net zero emissions economy. Furthermore, mobilising private finance, as referred to by Liz Smith, into Scotland's transition is absolutely crucial in order for Scotland to achieve our emission targets. We will create the correct conditions for inward investment, removing barriers, driving innovative private investment solutions. And this is exemplified by our green investment portfolio I launched in the summer, which sets out £3 billion worth of net zero investments to global investors, and the establishment of the Scottish National Investment Bank, as referred to by Stuart Stevenson, and its capitalisation of £2 billion of public money over the next 10 years, which will be central to driving net zero market growth. On the issue of conditionality, as mentioned by Claudia Beamish, we will work with our enterprise agencies in partnership with businesses to best align support with our long-term climate, environmental, economic and social goals. On communities, we need a place-based approach. Our programme for government talked about the 20-minute neighbourhoods, and will deliver on those as a clear way forward. Mark Ruskell talked about resilience and the reconnection to nature and active travel, but the importance of a stimulus for action to reflect on GDP, and our leadership of the wellbeing government, now joined by Finland, is important in that. Sarah Boyack talked about community wealth building, and I agree, and we're supporting more community wealth building programmes and procurement. On skills, our Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan, published alongside the Climate Change Plan update, will support people to access green jobs through advice, retraining and aligning the skills system and growing demand for green jobs, as mentioned by the convener. And the Scottish Government is also working with Skills Development Scotland and partners to design the Green Jobs Academy, as referred to by Joe McAlpine, a national long-term programme to support the retraining and upskilling needed for transition to net zero. Support for jobs and skills in the 21-22 budget totals £1.1 billion, demonstrating our commitment to providing good green jobs, including the £100 million Green Jobs Fund. We know that Scotland is a clean electricity powerhouse. In 2019, 86.4% of the electricity generated in Scotland came from renewable or low-carbon sources. And looking ahead, as we further decarbonise energy, huge opportunities in the development of carbon capture and storage and the use of hydrogen to replace fossil fuels. And the scale of the challenge is enormous. And Angus MacDonald was quite right to point to the work at Falkirk Council and the industry challenges that are there. As highlighted by the Climate Change Committee, Scotland has potential to deliver negative emissions through our substantial carbon storage capacity in the North Sea, and we've got £180 million for Emerging Technologies Fund, which will support the development of negative emissions. And we're also committed to better understanding blue carbon, how it can help us mitigate and adapt to climate change, and we've committed funding to our blue carbon research programme. And Peter Chapman for the Conservatives to talk about sustainability of the fishing industry when they are currently currently destroying it on a day-by-day basis is beyond belief. What is not beyond belief is that he didn't read the committee's report and he's not aware of our marine plans and the blue economy work. And I might reflect to Maurice Golden, it's the UK government that's currently opening the first deep coal mine in 30 years. On the circular economy, as recommended by the Advisory Group on Economic Recovery in their June report, we will use a circular economy approach to build a stronger, more resilient economy. And now, as I come to my close, President Officer, on natural capital referred to many people, nature-based solutions are absolutely vital. And that is why there's a substantial investment to plant 18,000 hectares of new woodland every year. We will restore at least 250,000 hectares of peatlands by 2030. And on a just transition, we will ensure that all our actions align with legislative commitments to a just transition to net zero. And that green recovery has to work as a spine throughout all our action in a holistic cross-government way. Thank you again. I look forward to further discussion as we work with the committee and others to set the path, build and deliver on green recovery. Their report, this debate, is an important milestone on the journey, but is also clearly a signpost and points the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. I now call on Finlay Carson to close for the committee. Mr Carson, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. As Deputy Convener of the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform Committee, I'm pleased to close this debate. As Gillian Martin has already stated, this may be in a clear report, but many contributors identified actions which are required right across most of Parliament's committees, highlighting the need for an integrated plan for green recovery. Behaviour change is not something that would normally happen overnight, but with lockdown, rapid behaviour change has been forced upon us. And the committee heard from communities across Scotland how central a sense of community has been during lockdown and how important it will be to build on this as we recover. For almost a year now, people have been working locally and from home, travelling less, buying locally, and supporting local producers, shops and suppliers and using local services. And many people have also been walking, cycling, getting out and connecting more with nature, with positive impacts on our climate and our mental and physical health. But we urgently need to capture and lock in those positive behaviours, and the government need to get moving on this. The Committee on Climate Change, the CCC, noted that there is an opportunity to embed new social norms, especially for travel, that benefit well-being, improve productivity and reduce emissions. And we heard how essential it was that co-working spaces and local public sector hubs were developed to support remote working, improve rural connectivity and strengthen community spirit. And we must improve on how we build local capacity and decision-making within our communities and provide greater fiscal autonomy to do so, building a more resilient, just and healthy society and environment, putting in place the foundations in which we can build a more sustainable economy. Many members have already said that the government needs to deal with the issue of policy incoherence, where currently government and the public sector, and in some cases they're failing to work collaboratively or in a joined-up fashion. The recovery should take an integrated approach that transcends sectoral boundaries and builds on recognised social indicators, delivering national outcomes, particularly around the climate and biodiversity emergencies. The general principles on which to build a green recovery are clear, but there is a lack of clarity on how the government will make progress on delivering those national outcomes and where the responsibility to deliver sits within the sectors. One of those issues constantly raised was doubts about the adequacy of the rate of change and the action needed, and witnesses almost universally suggested that we're still some way off the genuine transformational change needed. For example, agriculture and land use. Of real concern was the CCC's recent progress report, which stated that new funding for agriculture and land use in Scotland is not enough to drive a structural realignment of rural funding in Scotland that properly incentivise carbon reduction, sequestration and climate adaptation. And Chris Stark from the CCC once again repeated that he did not see a plan to modernise agriculture and bring it to the point where it has a role in the net zero economy, and suggests Scotland is clinging to the old model of agricultural support. This was echoed by Professor Ray, who noted that while the recent programme for government mentions the land use strategy, plans for agriculture and for aligning post-cap support with net zero emission targets, there is no detail about when pilot schemes will commence, what a new rural support regime might look like, and how it might align with net zero and the green recovery. This lack of clarity must be addressed as a matter of urgency. And the committee also recognised the pandemic has brought about changes in food practices, including the development of direct and positive relationships between food producers and consumers, for example, local milk and egg deliveries, which is emphasising the importance of local food provision to increase community resilience. And the government must set out its plans to lock in these positive changes. The committee recommended that the Scottish Government set out new policies and support mechanisms for agriculture, forestry and other land use, with the role of land use and a green recovery embedded in the policies and proposals of the third land use strategy. Regional land use partnerships should be funded and frameworks developed into regional delivery mechanisms for new land use policies. I welcome much of the Government's commitment today, but the Minister must recognise that the vision for and delivery of a green recovery must go beyond the climate plan update. That's only part of the picture. A well-being economy and a green recovery needs to be at the very heart of the National Performance Framework, policy development and delivery and the Scottish budget. We need a clear green recovery route map to signpost the way with clear timetables, clear responsibilities for delivery across all parts of the public sector. And Liz Smith touched on how important that is and vital for public sector investors. Presiding Officer, almost all contributors in today's debate stress the need for government to take urgent action to maximise the green recovery. And if we are to get close to what we all recognise are ambitious climate change targets described by Chris Stark as on the fringe of credibility, the Scottish Government cannot ignore those concerns. And if the Minister truly believes that they're achievable, he should set out a route map to enable a shared understanding of where we want to be, a clear evidence-based vision for us all to get behind.
Thank you very much. And that concludes the debate on Green Recovery Inquiry, and it's time to move on to the next item of business, which is decision time, to which we now come. And there's only one question, and that is that motion 24078 in the name of Gillian Martin on Green Recovery Inquiry be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. I'll just pause for a moment to see if we're all agreed online. Thank you. That motion is therefore agreed. That concludes decision time, and I close this meeting.